Hey y'all, so today I'm going to show you how I turned this unicorno into the Pokemon Rapidash. Yeah, I know, real far jump from a unicorno to a Rapidash, but we're going to do it. I want to do something a little bit easier this time. So, this one is from Season 6, and to detach its head, you still do have to soften it with hot water. But you notice I have my X-Acto knife right there beside me. That's because these ones are molded all together. You will need a knife to cut the head off after it's softened. You want to let the head soak, or the whole body soak, for about 2 to 3 minutes. Remember, the water does need to be steaming. Use pliers or some other tool to use to get the figure out so you don't burn your hands. And use a cloth to protect your hands as you are cutting up the figure. Barely touch the figure if you can. And you can see I'm very carefully going in there and decapitating. So you just want to try and take your time with it. The softness allows it to be bent a lot more than it usually is, so you can get into the harder to reach places a lot easier, and just keep going until you have a more or less clean cut. After the head is detached, Rapidash doesn't have wings. It's not a flying type, it's just a fire type, so use the X-Acto knife to slice off the wings as close to the body as you can. I usually keep my wings off these unicornos if I take them off, just in case I need them for another project. You never know. After you slice the wings off, try to carve the access stuff as close to the body as possible, again, just to make it as smooth and consistent as you can. So anyone remember how in the last video I I didn't film where I was decapitating the figure? Well, in this one I didn't film where I was taking the paint off, and again I probably should have. This paint not only stained the figure, you can kind of see on the tail there, it was the same thing on the mane, but the stars on it, they had holographic stars decaled on it, and they were a little rougher to get out or get off. I had to get a Q-tip and kind of scrub to get those off, so it was a little bit harder, but still mostly the same old story, so you guys didn't miss much. Anyway, because the figure was stained so bad with the paint, I decided to put 2 coats of white paint all around it before I started the actual paint job. Usually on a white figure like this, that wouldn't be necessary, but again, with the staining, I decided better safe than sorry. Now, for the body, I only put the paint on the tail of the figure, the white paint, to cover up the stain. The body didn't really need it. And you can see me here taking out my Suguru. Suguru is air dry rubber. It's advertised as moldable glue. You can find it on Amazon in multiple different colors. I usually just get it in white and paint it. But it's air dry rubber that works as air dry clay. You mold it and it can, dry out and keep its shape, but this stuff also adheres to the figure, hence the term glue. Now, you saw me pinching off just a little bit while ago, and now you see me with my X-Acto knife kind of trimming it out just a little bit to make it look more flame-like. And I do a different pattern for each of the legs. I put this on one of each leg, all 4. And I did different patterns on each one because, a fire is kind of, wild. It's not going to look the exact same on each leg. And while I did go ahead and carve it out, I did have to come back in after it dried the full 24 hours. It does take 24 hours for this stuff to dry. Come back and resharpen some of those edges just to make them look more flame-like. And you can see me going in there with my dotting tool to blend it in on the figure just to make sure it's really held down there and not just, lightly stuck on. Just go around the base of the Suguru and make sure it is attached to the figure. I know it all just looks like one big white blurb right now, guys, but it will look better after the paint job gets on. But this is after it's spent 24 hours drying. I'm just slowly going in with my X-Acto knife and sharpening up some edges and cutting up some access just to make the edges look more pointy and again more flame-like, more lifelike. Just to make sure, you know, they actually look like flames and not like little curly ribbons or something like that. And again, you do need to wait the full 24 hours. It is possible for you to come back after it's partially dry and do this, but I would still recommend doing it after the 24 hours just to make sure it all keeps its shape. So you guys remember how I said in the beginning of this video I wanted a really quick, you know, easier kind of custom? This is the part where the easy part went away. So I wanted to try and create as, you know, realistic a flame effect as possible with just the paint. So I took a makeup sponge and on the corner of it, I painted some pale daffodil color, you know, that really light yellow, and then the other half that ripe tomato color, which is a very strong orange color. And you can see me going around the mane and tapping it. I was planning on putting the majority of the yellow on top and then the majority of the orange on the edges, but then as I was starting to do that, I saw that it was mixing up, so I'm like, okay, I'll just go over the entire mane and make it all like a tie-dye kind of look, and yeah, that didn't look so good in the end. And here you guys can see the more or less completed look of it. Yeah, to me, honestly, looking at the picture on the camera, it looks like someone just took a bunch of ketchup and a bunch of mustard and made a mess. So, you know, as I was painting this, I realized that, so I decided to do something a bit different for the tail to see how it looked, and that turned out a lot better. I know it's a bit off-centered, guys, excuse me, I'm still getting used to this. But I pretty much took 3 different paint brushes. For one, I painted the top of the tail, that pale daffodil. For the bottom half, I painted that ripe tomato. And I made sure that the paint went flush against each other, you know, where the yellow ended, the orange started. And then afterwards I took my third brush, as you can see here in a minute, and where the paint was still wet, where the yellow and the orange met, I went through and just lightly struck it with the paintbrush to blend it. And yeah, I know I'm completely out of frame now. Again, still getting used to the camera angle and making sure I'm in the frame, and I don't succeed a lot of the time. So I'm going to try and zoom in here a little bit so you guys can see what I'm talking about. So that's the dry brush. And the yellow and the orange are still wet. And I'm just going around that edge and tapping it with the brush pretty much. And making it so that the colors blend into each other, that they don't mix, but they blend and make them sort of, you know, transcend into each other nicely. So it's not just a blunt line, but also the colors are very clear. Unlike with that hot mess on the mane. Oh man, that thing was horrible. But I did love how I did with the tail, so yeah, that's how I fixed the mane. And now I am mimicking that same technique on the flames, on the little flames on each of the hooves. I'm just going in and, you know, dabbing on a lot of that orange colored paint on the bottom, and then I'll finish up with the yellow on the top, and then go back in with that same dry brush and do the exact same thing. Again, you're not trying to make the colors mix into each other like that crazy mess that was the mane, but you're just trying to make them blend into each other so that they transition well into each other. Here you guys can see the flames a little bit better. Sorry for my hair being in the frame. But if I had to make one suggestion when doing this, if you're doing anything that involves color blending like I'm doing here, do one at a time. In other words, you know, don't go to all 4 of the flames and paint the oranges and then paint the yellows, because by the time you get to the yellow, some of the orange may have already dried and you need them both wet in order to do the blending. In order to fix the mane, all I did was go over the mane again with white paint. It probably has about 5 coats of paint on it at this point, the mane, so Anyway, I'm just mimicking exactly what I was doing on the rest of the flames, putting the orange part and then, on the outer edges and then filling in with that yellow. Now, since I did do it in one big phase, I should have done it like just part of the mane at a time. But because I did it like this, I'm having to go back in with another brush and making the orange wet again, adding a little bit more in order for both of them to be wet enough for me to blend the two colors together. Rapidash has a very, very pale yellow color for its coat. So I added the same yellow paint, the pale daffodil color that I used for the flame, the mane, and the tail. And I mixed it with a little bit of white just to lighten it up even more, just to try to distinguish it from the color of the flames. And this took about 2 to 3 coats to make it fully covered and fully opaque. And of course I repeated the same process for the head, using the exact same color that I mixed up for the face, the horn, and the ears. Now, who can spot the difference here? I ended up really hating how the yellow in the flame and the yellow of the body looked so similar. So I grabbed the orange paint back out, I grabbed another yellow color out. This one's actually just called yellow, it's much darker. And I went over all the flames, the tail, and the hair, or the mane, again, just to make it more stand out. I am referencing a picture off screen here. Usually I try to make the eyes either exactly like the Tokidoki original eyes, just a big oval, or I make them the circular ones like you guys have seen me use before. But since Rapidash is so unicorn-like already, I wanted to go ahead and try to mimic it as close as possible to the Pokemon's actual eyes. So you can see me turning the head every now and then, making sure everything is as symmetrical and as even as possible. And I do this with a pencil first before I even think about touching it with any paint. After all of it is drawn on and I'm happy with it, I go in with a toothpick and outline the eye in the black color. And you guys have seen me use dotting tools occasionally. You can use those too if you have them, that you have one small enough. I do. I don't know why I keep reaching for a toothpick. If you guys do this a lot, I would recommend getting a very small ended dotting tool because they're just more comfortable to hold. If you're doing something small like these eyes that won't take a while, a toothpick's fine, but if you do something very intricate and very long lasting, if you sit there a while and do it, your hand will cramp for a bit. So I would suggest getting some rounded tools that are just easier to hold. While those eyes are drying, we're going to go in and do the hooves. Now, Rapidash, if you look at a picture of it, Rapidash is from the first gen. And when Pokemon keeps continuing, sometimes they recolor some of their older Pokemon slightly. So some of the newer versions of Rapidash have more gray in their on their hooves. The older ones have more of a dark blue kind of color, almost like a navy kind of color, and so that's the one I'm referencing here. I took my regular blue, cool blue or something, I don't know, a regular, bright colored blue, and I mixed it with black, and you can see I did this a while ago because that paint is kind of old, but it still works, and I just paint one coat on each of the hooves. Little tip, if you're using a 4-footed animal to repaint, try to turn it upside down when you're painting the feet. That way it doesn't get messed up. So now that the lines on the eyes have drawn, I'm going in with my red, again with a toothpick. I don't know why I keep reaching for those things when I have that dotting tool, but whatever. And painting the red iris in the eyes. To finish off the eyes, I just finally reach for my dotting tool instead of a toothpick. And I go in and color the white part of the eye behind the iris, as well as put a little dot for highlighting in the iris itself. I usually don't do this on my customs because the characters I make are like human characters remade into unicorns, but in this case I did highlight the inner part of the ear because Rapidash, the actual Pokemon, has that on it. I've done the coloring the inside of the ear on some of my customs in the past, but just not ones that I've done based on any other character. I do think they look cuter this way, though. I just don't think it makes sense with most of my other customs, but it definitely works for this one. And the color I'm using, I honestly have no idea. It was a color I mixed up so long ago. I think it's a mixture of that same orange color with a little bit of red, but I honestly am not too sure. After everything has been painted, it's finally time to put the head back together, head and the body back together. This time I'm using a lighter super glue, a thinner one, and again I wear gloves just to make sure I don't get it on my hands. I'm using a thinner one so that the seam won't be as noticeable. If you use the Gorilla Glue, it expands outwards as it dries, so you actually get this puffy residue over the figure. Not a lot to be too noticeable, but enough to bug me, so whenever I have to cut the head off like I did this one, it's more noticeable, so I just use this thinner one. And also, can anyone see the difference again, just like with the yellow paint? I didn't like the size of the eyes. They were way too small for the figure, so I went in, painted over them again with the yellow color, the coat color, and I redrew the eyes just to make them like twice as big so that they made more sense and looked better on the figure. 3 coats of sealant later, and our work is complete. There is Rapidash. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please comment below if you'd rather see some more Pokemon being adapted into unicorn form, you know, maybe Pokemon that don't look exactly like a unicorn to begin with. Give a little bit of a challenge. The next one isn't going to be like that. The next one's already completed. It'll be up in a few weeks, so look forward to that. So again, thank you so much for watching. Please like, share, comment, subscribe. Remember, it's a community, not a competition. And I'll see y'all later. Bye.